this lesson starts off our next unit, which is all about polynomials. Now, we need to talk about what a polynomial is before we can classify polynomials. So let's write in kind of like a definition here. Basically, I'm just going to give you like examples, and that's kind of all today is, giving you examples of different polynomials. So if we break down like the different roots in this word, poly, that word means many. So like, for example, a polygamist. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's like the sister wife stuff, like someone who has many wives is called a polygamist. So poly means many. Now, nomial, that means terms. So really, a polynomial is just many terms. Well, you guys hopefully know what a term is, and all of these things on this page here are examples of terms, like 8a to the 4th, 7, 12w squared, n to the 7th. Those are all terms. So let me give you an example of something that has many terms, or a polynomial. So maybe something like 3x squared plus 5x minus 6. Now maybe you're asking like, well, okay, well, like, is this all one term, or like, what is this? This is actually 3 different terms, so this would definitely be a polynomial, many terms. And I'm going to make a note off to the side here that the terms are separated by plus or minus signs. So that's how I knew there was 1, 2, 3. The plus and minus signs separate them. So terms separated by plus and minus signs. So kind of good to know. This is 3 terms. Now, if I kind of broke down each individual term, so maybe I just looked at 3x squared, there's 2 parts to this term. And you may already know this, but the 3, that's called the coefficient. It's basically just like the number that sits in front of the variable. And then obviously the x, it can be x squared, x cubed, it can be y, whatever, that's your variable. So coefficient and your variable. Okay, so polynomial, many different terms. Now today we're specifically going to be classifying polynomials. This sounds super fancy, but classify just means that we're going to be naming our polynomials. So if they ever ask you, classify the polynomial, or like, you know, you're just going to give me the name. So if they said like, hey, classify this type of dog right here, you would tell me, oh, this is a poodle. Okay, you just would tell me like the specific name of that dog, or in this case, polynomial. And polynomials, you guys, are just as exciting as breeds of dogs. Okay, got that squared away. Okay, so there's actually 2 different ways to classify or name a polynomial. And that's kind of why this line is right here. So 1 through 3 are going to show us how to name a polynomial one way, and then 4 through 7, those are going to show us how to name a polynomial another way. Okay, let's analyze though number 1. So they're asking me, what do all of these polynomials have in common? Polynomials, just terms. So 8a to the 4th, 7, 12w squared, n to the 7th. Well, if you notice, all of these are only one term. There's just one thing there. There's no plus or minus sign. So because these all have just one term, we have a specific name for them, and it's called a monomial. So you're going to notice that nomial is going to be in here because that means terms, and this is one term, so mon means one. Okay, so if it's just one term, it's called a monomial. So number 2, there's a pattern here. On this first one, 5x and 2, those are both a term. 6x to the 4th, 3x squared, those are both a term. So there's actually 2 terms for every single one of these polynomials. So if there's 2 terms, it's called a binomial. Again, the word nomials there. Bi means 2. A good way to remember this is like a bicycle has 2 wheels. That's going to help you remember number 3 as well. So all of these have 3 terms. And these are called trinomials. Again, think like a tricycle has 3 wheels. Okay, so monomial, binomial, trinomial. Now, naming the polynomials the way I just did, that's classifying them or naming them by the number of terms that they have. Okay, so that's one way to name a polynomial. You count how many terms there are and you give it its monomial, binomial, trinomial name. Okay, the second way to name a polynomial, if I analyze number 4, the ones listed here, notice they have different number of terms, like this one has 2, this is a binomial, that's a monomial, it only has 1. So it's not how many terms there are this time. Specifically, it's looking at the variable, not the coefficient, just the variable. So if I kind of look a little bit closer here, 8x minus 5. Well, this x, I know that it has an exponent, and if they don't write it, it's a 1. Same thing with 6z. The z has an exponent of 1. The b, the k, they all have an exponent of 1. And that's what they have in common. The highest exponent, there's only 1 in these cases. There's only one z or one x in each example. So the highest exponent is a 1. So therefore, these are called linear because the largest exponent on any variable is just a 1. So mx plus b, we did a lot with linear equations in first semester, and all of those just had a plain x. If it's just a plain x, a plain z, a plain b, the exponent's a 1, we call it linear. Okay, on the next one, again, there's a pattern here. So 7t squared, 11 plus d squared, 2p minus 4p squared. So in each polynomial, the biggest exponent is a 2. That's just a 1, so 2 is obviously bigger. If that's the case, these have a specific name as well, so it's not linear this time. If it's a 2, it's called a quadratic. And in this case, the largest exponent on any variable is 2. For 6, notice that each polynomial, the biggest exponent this time is a 3. These are called cubic polynomials. That one's easier to remember because like 4m cubed, that's like how you would say that. So if 3 is the biggest one, think it's cubed, it's called a cubic. And then the last one, number 7, what do these have in common? Well, 8, 125, negative 7, 2/5, that's just a plain number. There actually is a variable happening here, so if I just put it on the x here, or on the 8 here, like 8x to the 0 is technically what is there, but we all know that anything to the 0 power is just 1, so that would just cancel out, leaving me with just 8. Basically, if you just have a number and they don't even write the variable, these are called constants. The largest exponent, I know this is kind of weird, but the largest exponent on any variable is 0, but you're not going to see it because it just equals 1. So if you just see a plain number, call that a constant. All right, so naming the way that I just did by analyzing like, okay, well, what's the biggest exponent going on? That's classifying your polynomial by its degree. So again, that's just figuring out the largest exponent and naming it that way. All right, so that's kind of like giving us a lot of examples. This is really what you want to make sure you get down. Okay, this is going to give you a chart listing all the names that I just did. It just kind of puts it together a little bit nicer, and this will be a good thing to study for your quiz and your exam and to use as you practice. So again, there's 2 ways to classify, which means name a polynomial. So in this first little table, that's naming it by its degree, which is what I did at the bottom. That's by its biggest exponent. And then the second way is number of terms, which is what I did in 1 through 3. Okay, so let me just put it all together here. It's nothing new from the front. So the name based off the degree. Remember, if it's like x to the 0, you're not even going to write it. That's a constant. It's just going to be like a plain number. If the biggest exponent's a 1, that's linear. If it's 2, it's a quadratic. 3 is cubic. From there, so we kind of generalize it from there. There are names for everything beyond 3, but we only require that you remember and learn these 4 terms. So if you see a polynomial and like the highest exponent is 4, so maybe it's like y to the 4th, or if you see something that's like x to the 5th, those do have specific names, but we're going to keep it easy for you. If the biggest exponent is a 4, you're just going to say it's 4th degree. If it's a 5, you're going to say 5th degree. Okay, I'm going to put dot, 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 because like so on and so forth. If it's y to the 10th, you're just going to say 10th degree. You don't have to remember a specific name for those. All right, number of terms. And yes, you guys do have to know all of these. I'm not going to like give you a cheat sheet for the quiz. You have to memorize all this and study it. So number of terms. If there's only one term, monomial. 2 terms is binomial. 3 is trinomial. Again, if it has like 4 or more terms, it does have a specific name, but we're gonna like take it easy on you and just generalize from there on out. So if it's got 4 terms, 5 terms, 6 terms, 4 or bigger, you just call it a polynomial. We'll just say it's got many terms, too many to count. All right, so let me give you some examples and let's practice. I will ask you these kinds of things on both the quiz and the exam coming up. So if it says name it by its degree, biggest exponent, and by its number of terms. So you have to pick the name from both of these lists. And please put the correct name on the correct line. So maybe I'll do number of terms first. That one's a little bit easier. That's just something nomial. This one has 1, 2, 3 terms. So this is a trinomial. I could use my little chart up here. The degree, that's the biggest exponent. So in this case, that's a 2. That's just a 1, and there's a 0 there. So the biggest exponent is a 2, so that's going to be called quadratic. All right, this one right here, so there's only one term. It's just 9x, so one term is a monomial. And the degree on that one term, it's x to the 1, so I'm going to call that linear. And then example 3 here, there's 2 terms, so that is a binomial. And its degree, analyze closely, it's x squared and then x cubed, so 3 is the biggest, and that's called cubic. Okay, so if you study the terms, that's not that hard. Now there's a second part to today's lesson, besides just naming or classifying, and that's being able to write a polynomial in what's called standard form. Now to do this, to write a polynomial in standard form, all you have to do is arrange the terms in the right order, and you order them from biggest exponent to smallest exponent. Keep in mind that you must combine like terms if you can. So if there's 2 terms that are like z squared, you'd want to put those together to make it simplified and in standard form. Realize that like terms have the same variable and exponent, but they can have different coefficients. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So let me give you an example. So let's say I have something like 3m cubed plus 5m cubed. This is an example of what I just said. So these 2 terms, they have the same variable. They're both using m. They have the same exponent on m, both m cubed, but they have different coefficients, which is just the number in front. So 3 here, 5 here. But these are like terms because they both have m cubed, so I could combine those if I saw something like this. And you're just counting how many m cubes there are. There's 3 here, there's 5 here, so this is 8m cubed. And we'll get more into this next lesson, but just realize that if you can combine stuff, you should. So I'm going to do 2 of these. I want you guys to try example 2. But here's what I would do on number 1. So I have to name it again like I just did, but the next part that I haven't done yet is writing it in standard form. So that means I have to go from biggest exponent to smallest exponent. So I have 2 terms here, and they do need to be flipped around because x cubed is obviously bigger than x squared. Now, please be careful that the sign in front of a term needs to stay in front of it. So this 2x cubed is negative because there's a negative in front. So when I flip these terms around to go from biggest exponent to smallest, I got to keep that negative in front with the 2. People will forget that. So it's negative 2x cubed first, and then that's a positive 5x squared. So I just went from biggest exponent to smallest. Then if I named it, okay, number of terms, this has 2 terms. So it's a binomial. The biggest exponent I now can see easier is a 3, so I call that cubic. Okay, try number 2. I'm going to finish off with number 3. So here's an example of where you can put stuff together. I see p cubed here and here. Watch your signs. This is 8 plus negative 8, which is just 0, or just think of it as 8 minus 8. So those actually go away. Don't even write 0 p cubed, it's gone. Then I can combine the p's, so I have negative 3p's here plus 3p's here, which again, that's 0. So don't even write 0 p's, that's gone. The only thing left is 7. Obviously that's in standard form, it's the only term. This is a monomial. And remember, when it's just a plain number, there really is no degree. It's just 0, so we call that constant.